Okay. After yesterday's video about tanks, now it's time to go over healers. Which healers to play in Season 2, which healers are you thinking about rolling or re-rolling or continuing to play in Season 2, and how are they looking right now before the release of the next patch 10.1. For today, we have something a little bit more spicy for healers, because healers are in a little bit more of a question mark of a situation compared to tanks. Just as much as we said for tanks, because the next season comes and we get the borrowed power of tier sets, and then we get the possible balance tuning of Blizzard. Those are the two things which might change the situation for healers. That's what we have to look towards for trying to gauge what is going to be the good choice for Season 2 as a healer. Well, when it comes to balance tuning, we kind of have to go the same way that we went yesterday with tanks, because this one is pretty much going to be the same answer we also have for healers. There aren't going to be really any significant balance tuning changes planned right now for healers in 10.1. Which means that, once again, what we have to pay attention to is the tier sets, together with the current situation, the current power of the healers. And the current power, as mentioned, because they have different power levels in the raid or in Mythic Plus, is a bit more tricky. You know, at the moment we might say this is the current power level based on, you know, the high key levels and the popularity of the specs in Mythic Plus. This is the tier list of Mythic Plus healers so far. Shaman is rising a lot, but I don't think they will be able to rise as high as the top two healers in Mythic Plus so far. So this is the situation for Mythic Plus before getting into Season 2, and this is the situation in the raid before getting in Season 2. Yes, the situation in the raid looks shocking right now, because you have been used to seeing Evoker at the top into the S tier for like 2.5 months, so now seeing this so low looks very weird. But purely based on the current results, this is the situation. Restoration Shaman is the one that at the moment is the clear ahead healer when it comes to raid healing so far. So as we can see, we have some quite significant, quite drastic differences in the level of power of the healers in the two different activities. Now, what can the tier set change with these two different power levels of the healers? Let's start by talking about the couple of more disappointing tier sets, perhaps even 3 disappointing tier sets, starting with Holy Priest. This is not a good one, because Holy Priest is, of course, as we mentioned, already quite weak and not really that wanted in general in Mythic Plus, so this is not a good start for Priest. This is a decent, okay, it's not terrible, it's a decent one for the raid, because of course you can get more bonuses, more benefits from Prayer of Mending, jumping to multiple targets multiple times, and that can happen more often in the raid with 20 targets. So the 2-piece set bonus has more value, and then the 4-piece set bonus, you can use it more on abilities like Sanctify in the raid, which is going to be very, very good. So it's not terrible in the raid. However, in Mythic Plus, it loses a lot of value, and as mentioned, Holy Priest is already very weak in Mythic Plus. So you are quite weak in Mythic Plus. It's unlikely many players will pick Holy, because you're not going to really do much in Mythic Plus. Therefore, it's unlikely it will become more popular than it is. It will continue to have very likely quite the popularity in the raid. This tier set is decent enough for raid purposes, so I guess it's not gonna devalue too much their possible power in the raid, but I wouldn't count too much on Holy Priest if you wanted to focus on this spec for the next season. The only good thing for Holy Priest is that it is played in the same class as Discipline. So you always have a 50-50 option to go to the other spec of your class, unlike any other healer at the moment. So you do have that option as a Holy Priest. The main issue is that the style of healing of Priest, of pure continuous HPS, is very similar to the style of healing of Resto Shaman and Resto Druid. And at the moment, they are both better than Holy Priest, which makes it kind of hard to justify an extra priest over those two specs being in the raid. I guess the only thing is Power Infusion or the only thing is if you don't have Fortitude in the raid. Those are just about the only reasons you would want a Holy Priest at the moment. So definitely not looking too good for Holy. The other of the more disappointing tier sets goes to Holy Paladin. We have mentioned this before and we will continue to mention this tier set because it does not really synergize with anything in your toolkit. It's gonna be buffing either your Light Summer or your Holy Prism, and those two abilities are weak. That's basically all there is to say about this tier set. Also, the 2-piece set bonus, giving you more healing to your Holy Shock, is also quite terrible, because your Holy Shock heals for quite little. It's not anymore one of your main sources of healing, so it's not really that powerful of a buff. Even the cooldown reduction, even the CDR you get from the 2-piece set bonus is not even strong enough to buff Light Summer and Holy Prism enough. So that's kind of the issue with Holy Paladin's tier set. They are doing fine right now. The small change to Avenging Crusader is going to make it much more viable in Mythic Plus, because now it hits 5 targets instead of 3. So it's going to be much more smooth healing in Mythic Plus, and also much better healing, much less overhealing in the raid as well by hitting 5 targets. So that's a slight improvement, but the tier set itself is not really helping Holy Paladin in the next season. So it still has its niche. Having one Paladin for Devotion Aura and for Aura Mastery's cooldown is still very, very valued in the raid. You're likely still going to get your comfy raid spot as a Holy Paladin. In Mythic Plus, it's gonna be harder to imagine them making way. Their biggest issue right now continues to be their lack of damage in Mythic Plus. They have definitely very low AoE damage at the moment in Mythic Plus, which sets them quite far behind Resto Druid, Resto Shaman, and Preservation Evoker at the moment in Mythic Plus. So definitely a more solid pick for the raid, not as much in Mythic Plus, but also not nearly as bad as something like a Holy Priest or what we're about to mention next after Holy Paladin, which is Mistweaver Monk. So the tier set of Mistweaver Monk is actually very similar to Holy Priest in the sense that it is more powerful in the raid and a disaster more or less in Mythic Plus, because the 2-piece set bonus is focused on giving you back mana. Now, giving you back mana is quite valuable in the raid. Mistweaver Monk is quite the mana-hungry slut in the raid, so it's definitely better for them in the raid. However, in case you did not notice, you can stop and drink in Mythic Plus out of combat, which kind of makes the 2-piece set bonus much less valuable. What is also the other problem of this tier set in Mythic Plus for Mistweaver is that Mistweaver has pathetic damage in Mythic Plus, and this tier set does nothing for giving you extra damage in Mythic Plus. So you are sort of weak in Mythic Plus already, you're not popular at all in Mythic Plus, this tier set is doing nothing for you in Mythic Plus, particularly in damage, and also there is no balance tuning coming your way, making you any more powerful in Mythic Plus. So there is no real reason to see a Mistweaver Monk increasing in value on the horizon when it comes to Mythic Plus. When it comes to the raid, yes, it's gonna be stronger, yes, it's gonna be slightly better to manage your mana. However, we are back to the problem of Holy Priest. At the moment, Mistweaver Monk's continued stable HPS with very poor raid cooldowns, that's their style, very similar to Holy Priest, is still losing out to Resto Shaman, Preservation Evoker, and Resto Druid, who not only can have continuous stable HPS, but also have much stronger cooldowns in the raid, for example. So they weren't being taken before in the raid to begin with. I don't think this set bonus is enough to make them more valuable in the raid, and then there is the problem that in Mythic Plus they were also not too good, and this tier set does very little for Mythic Plus. So a big problem, I would say, at the moment. If you were thinking or planning or interested in playing Mistweaver Monk, I would not recommend it at the moment. Unfortunately, despite the 17 round of buffs in a row they have received at this point, I still don't think is quite enough to fix the spec as a whole. After this we get into something a bit more interesting because we get to Resto Shaman. Now, this is more interesting, of course, because Resto Shaman is currently the highest HPS in the raid, and also currently much more valuable, rising steadily in Mythic Plus as well. They have tons of damage now in AoE thanks to the buffed acid rain of their healing rain. They have tons of HPS now, so it makes them much more valuable. However, what about their tier set? Their tier set is poor. So the tier set of Resto Shaman gives them an instant heal when they cast a healing rain on the targets with your Riptide on them. This is a problem because you don't have that many targets with Riptide on them. On the very best case scenario, you're gonna be having 3 or 4 targets with Riptide on. It's a good enough, I guess, heal in Mythic Plus, and also the 4-piece set bonus, the buffs you gain, again, are too small because you only have 3 to 4 targets affected by Riptide. So it would be a 3 to 4% healing done increase for 6 seconds, or 3 to 4% increase to the healing of your next chain heal. You know, these are quite weak overall. Also, of course, we have to mention, even though it doesn't matter for Resto Shaman that the tier set does nothing for your damage, doesn't matter because Resto Shaman already has more than enough damage to be viable, so this is not a problem that it is not present in their tier set. However, this is a situation similar to what we mentioned yesterday for tanks about Prot Paladin. Prot Paladin also has a mediocre, subpar tier set, but they have the benefit of already being an S tier tank spec. So that's the benefit of already being the best, is that even with an average tier set, you can continue to be strong because you were already strong. Shaman was already strong. Right now, this tier set is not particularly great, but they will continue to be strong because they are strong already. So if you were hearing the whispers in the corridors about Resto Shaman being a meta flavor of the month spec for this end of the season, then you should be more or less quite safe to continue focusing on Resto Shaman for the beginning of Season 2. Now, on to a pretty interesting topic of discussion, which is Preservation Evoker. Preservation Evoker dominated the first couple of months or so of the season by being the top healer in Mythic Plus and the top healer in the raid. Then they suffered something like 3 to 4 nerfs in a row, and now they are not nearly as powerful as before. So, can the tier set sort of help them a little bit more get back on their feet in Season 2? Well, the answer is likely, possibly, yes, because their tier set is actually very good. The 2-piece set bonus is very strong in Mythic Plus, and it has some windows, some echo plays, or even just flat out using it normally in the raid can also heal for a lot because of the extra heal over time that is applied by Spirit Bloom, as well as the freebie 15% more healing of Dream Breath. Dream Breath is your highest healing ability in many cases, so getting it increased by 15% can be quite good. This 2-piece alone can already net you 6-ish plus % of your healing done, and then there is the 4-piece, which is even stronger. The 4-piece will give you 2 free essence bursts roughly every 30 seconds. This is particularly powerful because the build of Evoker likely to happen in Season 2 is not going to be the Echo build, it's not going to be the spam Echo and turn that Echo into something else. It's going to be your Pretty Green Flower build. And the Pretty Green Flower build gains much more value from essence bursts, because right now Evokers use essence burst for Echo, which costs 1 essence, and now in Season 2 they will use essence burst, the free cast of a spender, with Emerald Blossom, which costs 3 essences. So you're not cheating 2 essences with this tier set, you are cheating 6 essences every 30 seconds. This is also going to net you some 8 to 10% more healing. Together with the 2-piece set bonus is going to be quite the significant healing increase in the raid. Not to mention, the 2-piece set bonus is also still very powerful in terms of healing for your Mythic Plus runs. And also, if you really wanna be technical, the 4-piece set bonus can also be used for damage, because Essence Burst can also be used for disintegrates, for single target damage. So overall, Evoker was slightly lower after the nerfs. Now though, it has been buffed a couple of times in the Flower build, which was still not played, and then in Season 2 with this tier set more tuned around this Emerald Blossom build, it looks like it will go back to having very consistent, very solid HPS in the raid. Of course, the flower build will still suffer from spread fights, where not enough players can be grouped for your Emerald Blossom to do healing, so it has more weaknesses than the current build of Evoker, but it definitely still looks better than it is now. So if you were one of the guys or gals worried about the nerfs to Preservation Evoker and whether or not it was going to be going in the dumpster after the nerfs, no, not really. It will still be quite the powerful spec in the raid, still with very, very powerful raid cooldowns to use in the raid. So I would not be worried about the loss of the power of Evoker coming in Season 2. After Evoker, we have our top 2. Our top 2 in the list of strongest tier sets. Number 1 is Resto Druid. This one, there isn't much really to talk about, because we have talked about this at length, many people did, on how powerful this tier set is. Resto Druid is already one of the strongest picks in Mythic Plus right now, and also a solid pick. Not the strongest, not amazing, but still solid pick in the raid. This 2+4 piece set bonus is going to be very strong in both activities. It's going to be massive for raid healing and raid cooldowns. The 4-piece set bonus for continued damage fights, okay, for continued rot damage, overtime damage in fights is insane for how much more your HOTS will tick in those fights. It has been nerfed, yes, it has been nerfed by a bit, because before it was even more absurd, but even now, with the nerf, it is still very, very powerful. 16 extra seconds of a slightly weaker flourish after your original flourish is still a very powerful, basically extra cooldown for your Resto Druid. So Resto Druid was already meta, was already popular, already did not have that many problems with doing more damage, so not having extra damage in this tier set doesn't really hurt them, and then they get even more powerful, even more throughput, even more HPS thanks to this set bonus. So generally just, smooth sailing for Resto Druid going into Season 2. If anything, they will just get stronger. We have left the more controversial for last, because the last in line is the current strongest tier set for healers in the game, which is the one to Discipline. This is the reworked one, because before this one, Discipline Priest would have landed at the bottom of this list of tier sets. Instead now, it's the strongest. Not only do you get a welcome damage increase to your dots and a healing increase to your Radiance, which is whatever, because your Radiance doesn't heal for much. The real powerful one is the 4-piece set bonus. Having 3 seconds longer atonements with Radiance, which is the main way for you to apply atonement in large numbers at once, is very, very powerful already. Plus, your spells having a chance to cause your next Radiance to be instacast and cost no mana, and the fact that you can stack it up twice is going to significantly speed up the time with which you take to ramp as a Discipline Priest. Not to mention significantly reduce the amount of mana you spend in a raid. So those two things combined were 2 of the biggest annoyances of a Discipline Priest in a raid. The time for you to set up and the time for you to be immobile, having to hard cast many spells for your ramp, and then the mana you were spending doing that. So this set bonus is at the very least helping you fix many of these issues as a Discipline Priest. So Discipline Priest, as I said, is the more controversial one because they were quite weak in Mythic Plus, and they were also quite low in the raid. Now, many good experienced raiders know that this is definitely not true, especially when it comes to early season pushing, because the damage reduction that Discipline Priests can bring to a raid is super important early on in a tier when you are undergeared. So when you do take way more damage and you are way more at risk of dying, that's why very often many of the top guilds even run world first kills with Discipline Priests in the raid, because that is their power. So it is definitely a misleading type of ranking for the power of Discipline in the raid. The tier set still does something in Mythic Plus. It gives you some more damage, some quicker ramping to party heal in Mythic Plus, definitely, but the main importance, the main power of the tier set is in the raid. In how more powerful it will be in the raid. So all in all, thanks to also the help of being able to be priest and also being able to choose holy, I think if you were thinking about playing discipline, you still have to look at this from the perspective of being a raider. I don't think you will find too much happiness if you were a convinced Mythic Plus player and you wanted to try out discipline. That is still likely not going to have much popularity in Mythic Plus. I still think that Resto Shaman, Evoker and Resto Druid will have, maybe Holy Paladin will have definitely way more of a split of the population of Mythic Plus compared to something like Discipline. Discipline is going to be a much more niche pick in Mythic Plus. Still though, for the raid, you can definitely be a solid pick, an all-rounder in the raid with what you can bring as a Discipline, which is very unique compared to the other healers. So this would be a more raider-focused pick as a healer to go Discipline. I would be definitely comfortable with rolling a Discipline if my goal was to go and raid. I still think it will definitely have plenty of room in Mythic raiding as a spec. So with this all done, this was the total recap of the situation when it comes to healers so far. As I mentioned at the start, the situation was much more spicy compared to tanks because of the different power levels the healers have in the raid and in Mythic Plus. There are going to be some interesting things to keep track of, like how much more powerful could Discipline get after this powerful tier set, or if the healing increase of Evoker after their many nerfs is going to be enough to bring them back to be very powerful. For example, if Holy Paladin will be hurt too much by having a quite weak tier set, not synergizing with anything in their toolkit, or if they will be fine even with that. So it is more of a question mark season at the start for healers, definitely, compared to tanks. So with this said and done about healers, all there's left to do is just wait and see how things turn out, and also to see if Blizzard will actually hit us with some surprise balance tuning in these last 3 weeks before the release of Season 2. However, with this out of the way, all there is left to do on this Saturday, on this weekend, is to leave each other. So we start our goodbyes by thanking all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and help to the growth of the channel. You can of course still support in completely free ways, like liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Also, further free ways to support would be following me over on my Twitter, as well as following me over on my stream on Twitch. So with these unnecessary things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, no, this time there is no hopium, there is no copium to take. The top healers right now will remain the top healers in Season 2.